Welcome to the Chris Spangle Show. It is a special election eve edition, and I am here with Rhinehold. Rhinehold, how are you?
I'm doing well.
I did a bonus episode for our patrons earlier, and it was so bad. This is where you go, how bad was it?
How bad was it?
It was so bad that we're now doing another episode here while I'm in my bed because my son now sleeps in my office. He was sleeping in our room for the first year, but then we were like, we can't take this anymore. We haven't slept in a year. So now he sleeps in my office and I can't go in there and podcast. So we're doing audio only this time. And I'm tired. My voice, if you can't tell, my voice sounds super rough.
Scratchy.
Sorry, I just got
Yeah.
Big news in the last few days out of Iowa, of all places. There's a pollster there who is a very reliable pollster. Her name is Ann Selzer. She had a big miss in 2004 where she predicted that Kerry would win Iowa. And then George Bush ended up winning Iowa. But that is because between the time that she took the poll and Election Day, they had a giant rally in like Sioux Falls, Iowa or something. I forget what she said. It ended up, it's partly why Dashiell lost in South Dakota. But it's a reminder that I'm saying that because it's a reminder that polls are a snapshot in time. So even if Ann Selzer is right that Kamala Harris is winning Iowa by 3 points, that was last week. It may not be that way on Election Day, but all polls are just a snapshot in time.
Just announcing that poll could lead to get out the vote efforts for the Republicans in Iowa and getting them to the polls, which could change everything.
But this is voter suppression psyops. Which is the crazy thing. If you really stop and think about a poll that shows that your opponent is winning, it has the effect that it makes your team work harder. So if it's a psyop, is it a psyop by the Trump people paying Ann Selzer to lie so Trump can get out the vote? Or just everything is fake news these days that they don't like, and it's very silly.
Plus, there's a whole argument of the flooding the zone that's been going on with a lot of kind of right-leaning.
We'll talk about that. But so anyways, Ann Selzer says that Trump won Iowa by, was it 5 points in 2020? I think it was 5.
Yeah.
It was
I remember one was
margin.
7. One was 7 and it turned out to be 8. One was pretty good and it turned out to be almost spot on. Yeah.
Yeah. So Ann Selzer, everybody just assumed Iowa was going to Trump by 3 to 5. Mm-hmm. And then she has this poll for the Des Moines newspaper that shows Kamala winning the state by 3 points. So Ann Selzer is an outlier poll in all these different polls, which we'll talk about why. But just to give you an idea of her track record, she's the pollster that predicted that Barack Obama would win the Iowa caucuses. She's one of the few pollsters in 2016 to show that Donald Trump was winning. So when she releases a poll, everybody in the country really pays attention because she's very accurate. Why is she accurate? One of the reasons is the way that she actually does the methodology. What most pollsters do, and so we're basically talking fantasy football nerd stuff the night before the election here. You may be listening the day of the election. So we're just going to talk through numbers and what may happen and what all the different polls look like, knowing that nobody knows anything and we can't predict what's going to happen. But this Selzer poll is interesting just because of her accuracy, and it goes against what everybody's saying. And so what she does is she doesn't try to look back at 2020 and then construct what she thinks the voting public will look like in 2024, which is what a lot of pollsters do. They try to guess who's going to come out and vote. What she does is she takes the population of Iowa and then picks her likely voters, which are people who have voted or are going to vote for sure, and then builds her demographics within her poll around the makeup of Iowa. Let's say it's 80% white, 20% African American. That's how she samples it, which is why she's always a little bit different than other people. The big swing in this was older women, especially older white women. And that's an interesting, because obviously things, Rhinehold, are becoming way more polarized between the sexes. There's like a 30-point difference between men and women in this race. Men are going for Trump. Women are going for Harris. I can't think of another election where it was this polarized between the sexes. Obviously, I think abortion plays a lot into that. Donald Trump's outreach to men is reaching across Latino men, black men, typically people who voted for, as a bloc, voted for Democrats. Also, two of the least reliable voting publics. So if you're a Republican counting on black men to turn out, they're the least likely to actually turn out to vote. For all that talk, who knows how that actually turns out? But
possibility of the first woman president is getting a lot of women out too, on top of the Dobbs issue. So
I haven't heard a single person say that's their motivation. You may be right, but I just have not heard a single person on TV, in real life, online, anywhere say that they're voting for Kamala because she's a woman.
I think it's partially why they were more excited about Kamala than they were about Biden. I think that gives them a vibe. I guess that's the vibe thing that they were talking about. But when they ask them why they're voting, I guess in Iowa, the number one was protecting democracy, and number two is abortion.
Yeah, here's the problem that I have with the polling industry reconstructing their 2020 audiences. Mm-hmm. January 6th and Dobbs hadn't happened in 2020.
Correct.
And like when I talk to my Republican and Libertarian friends, there's a pretty healthy amount of them that are voting for Kamala Harris. Like people you would not believe are voting for Kamala Harris. And a lot of them are like Nikki Haley Republican types, which is another block that I think is going to make a big difference in this election. People who maybe, in Indiana, we had the Barack Obama, Mitch Daniels voter. They'd vote for the Republican for governor, but the Democrat for president. I think January 6th plays a bigger role in people's decision-making than is accurately reflected and talked about. Like anecdotally, the people that I talk to, January 6th is like the reason that Republicans and Libertarians don't want to take a chance on him. And it's a big motivator for Democrats for sure. Mm-hmm. So vote, like constructing your audience based on a 2020 vote turnout, or like looking at numbers and saying, how does Selzer in Iowa have this weighted with 26 women voting Democrat, and there were only 9 that voted in 20. So if you really think about it, you take a 70-year-old woman. She came of age in the late 60s. She knew what life was like before Roe. She lived life after Roe. She's got daughters. She's got granddaughters. They also were educated in like schooling that was deeply steeped in the myths of America. Washington chopped down the cherry tree and all that nonsense. Also, democracy.
Was it 50 years ago women got the right to actually have their own bank account and things like that. So there are women in their 60s and 70s who remember that time, and there's a fear that there's going to be a push to go back to that sort of thing. That's that whole message, we're not going back. That's where that's coming from.
Yeah.
Not just abortion, but also a lot of other fears too.
So I think if Harris wins big, these two groups, older women and the Nikki Haley voter, because like you've got to think about North Carolina, 250,000 people in that state in the primary voted for Nikki Haley 30 days after she dropped out. In Indiana, she got 20% of the vote. She dropped out like 40 days before that. 20% of the Republican Party here in Indiana, which is a very red state, does not want to vote for Donald Trump. Doesn't mean that they won't. People tend to come home. But let's say 10% of those people defect to the Libertarian, to a write-in, to... You could have Jim Banks running for Senate here beat Donald Trump in a state like Indiana in the undervote.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is that they may not vote for Harris, but they may stay home. They may vote for somebody else. Yeah, and that's the real big deal, is that these are the never Trumpers, right? They're calculated into that kind of calculation too. Now Haley went back to the fold and tried to join in with Trump, as she put out a message a week ago that she says she's been basically frozen out. No one will talk to her. She can't do anything to help the campaign. And it's like, you would think that they would be smart enough to put her out front and center to say, hey, look, we all come together.
But that's not what
try to get some of those.
But that's not what the Trump movement's about. It's about loyalty at any cost.
Yep.
There's no room. If you think the Republican Party is a big tent party anymore. That's not how it works. Like they're looking for ideological adherence to the MAGA agenda. So all this talk about Ron Paul, who will be a part of the Republican administration, it's like, if you really believe that, is Mexico paying for the wall? So
yeah,
I just don't buy it.
Yeah, it's just amazing to see what people are willing to throw away in order to, because someone dangles a little piece of cheese in front of them, and they're not going to give them the cheese. They're going to take it away from them eventually. But it's like they believe it. They just want to believe it so bad. It's been on their mind so much for so long that they just can't not take the swipe at it.
Yeah, Nikki Haley, though, is the first person that has. So Megyn Kelly, bleeding out of her whatever, mad at Donald Trump for bleeding out of her whatever 10 years ago, is speaking at a Trump rally tonight.
Yeah.
Trump likes to take former opponents and humiliate them.
Well,
and Nikki is like the first person I've seen want to get into the fold that he hasn't let in the fold.
Yeah. Look what he did with Mitch McConnell the other day.
What'd he do?
He was on stage talking about how horrible it was, and he can't believe that he got him to vote to support him because he's so bad. But we need to do something about getting rid of him. And was mocking him for supporting him.
He's the guy that got him the tax cuts. Like he's the one who got him the Supreme Court. Merrick Garland probably should be on the Supreme Court.
Definitely, yeah.
It's just the crazy thing about Mitch McConnell. And like, I'm not saying I'm a Mitch McConnell fan, but if you want to just be clear about how history works, the history of the first Trump administration is that most of the good things that came out of that administration are because of Reaganite conservative establishment people like Mitch McConnell, like his chiefs of staff, Reince Priebus, people that like worked to get him what his agenda, because they were working the way that Washington worked. Those people are not going to be around.
Nope.
Like the effective people who had networks of power, those people are not going to be in the administration. It's going to be people that are loyal to Donald Trump, who don't necessarily have relationships in the same ways. And I think it's going to be much harder for him to actually achieve things in that second term. And it's just always weird to me that the whole Mitch McConnell thing, because he should thank the guy for actually getting him the good stuff, like tax cuts and the Supreme Court, the stuff that I like, that I thought was good.
And he's talking about bringing some of these people up on charges, military tribunals and things like that.
That's just hyperbole. You're just a lib. You're just listening to the mainstream media. What do you know? Why are you taking him seriously, you idiot?
You can't just believe what he says. He's not going to do any of that. Okay.
That really is the fascinating thing, is
he'll do all the things that you like that he says, but he won't do any of the things that are bad.
The thing is, some of his supporters like those things. They do want to see people drawn up on charges. They wouldn't mind seeing Mike Pence hung.
No, they were there on January 6th trying to make it happen.
I think the January 6th crowd is like so indicative of the Republicans and the Trump voters that I talk to. There's like the people outside who are taking selfies, who are just having fun with the family atmosphere of the January 6th rally, who are just like, I'm just a Republican and I'm going to vote for tax cuts and my life is better under Trump. And I just listen to Ben Shapiro every day. And so I believe this. And then there's, I've got zip ties. And I have zip ties because I intend to use the zip ties. Like I didn't bring the zip ties for fun.
Yeah, they've got.
I think that's a much smaller crowd, but those people are there in the Trump coalition.
They had bug spray. They had pipe bombs. They had guns. There was all kinds of people prepared for a lot of things that day.
Those people brought. That's the thing about January 6th. If given the opportunity, those people would have used those things. They just didn't get the opportunity. So, and
there's a funny story about there's one person, I can't remember his name, but he was like made a mad dash and got the door closed before they could get in and get to where the senators were at. If they hadn't,
like
they hadn't got that door closed,
guys, yeah,
they hadn't done that. Like a second later, they would have been in, and who knows what could have happened after that. Yeah,
going back to not Ron Paul necessarily, because I think Ron Paul would say whatever you want, Trump. Like, I don't think that Ron Paul would be necessarily combative with Trump, but I do find Robert Kennedy Jr. to be fascinating that he hasn't been kicked out yet, because he's saying, I've been promised these things and I'm going to be given authority on these things, and I'm going to do these things. And that is something that Trump doesn't like. Trump likes to be the one to make the announcement. Trump likes to have the moment. And so for Robert Kennedy, so I really wonder if having those two, I don't ever anticipate Robert Kennedy Jr. actually getting a role in the administration, because I think he's unable to swear fealty to Trump. And you can't have two lead guitarists in a band. It just doesn't work. Somebody's got to play rhythm guitar, and Robert Kennedy Jr. is not that guy.
But the other take on that is there are things in running the country, running the executive branch, that he really doesn't care about. And those things are probably things that RFK Jr. really does care about. So he's okay, let him have it. He can do it and do what he wants to, as long as he's getting things done, and go for it. Because you remember, this is Trump's second go around. He's not supposed to be able to get a third. He's not running for election. He's not re-election. He's not running for poll numbers. He's just going to do what he wants to do, because he's running for legacy.
Yeah.
So as long as it's not going to break his legacy, he's going to let him do whatever he wants.
So do you think that Kennedy being on the ballots in some of these swing states will actually, like, I know in the Iowa poll, for instance, Chase Oliver had 1%, Robert Kennedy had 3% in that poll.
Yeah. He may still get those votes, because there are people who just will not pull the Trump lever. I know there's people I've talked to who are still writing in RFK Jr., even though he was pulled from their ballots, because they're not going to vote for Trump. But there's going to be enough people who do swing it. And I always look at those. It's funny, because you look at those polls and people are going to do 1% for Chase, 3% for RFK. Then the election results come out and they're a third of that, because people get in there, they start thinking about it, they get in the ballot box and they go, man, I can't have Harris in there. So they'll pull the trigger on the other side.
Yeah.
That's why we always, because we do this all the time on the Libertarian side of things, where we see those numbers and we think, oh, we're going to do good. And then you get in there and they do the vote.
Oh, we're polling at 8%, and then you get 2%.
Yeah.
People go home.
That's a recent thing, because it used to be, it was 2012 was the first time we got to near 1% since 2000, or since 1984.
Yeah.
So that's how long it had been since we even sniffed 1%. So everybody's like, we're only getting 3%. I'm like, you don't understand how good that was.
Yeah.
We were swaying elections. Those 3% were literally deciding who won some of these states, one way or the other. And that's when you get them to say, okay, now we're going to listen to you and incorporate some of your messaging maybe in there. And that's what they think is happening with Trump. And Trump is just using that through Wayne Allen Root and Steve Bannon. Right?
Yeah. Let's give you, all right, before I read like a pro-Trump analysis of why Trump's going to win on election day, let's finish up with Kamala Harris. An Iowa poll obviously is a big deal.
Well,
but I think one thing that I've been thinking about is, so this is a little bit of a long story, which are the only kind I have. In 2020, if the candidate who was leading the news cycle, like if a candidate was leading the news cycle, their polling would start to drop. So anytime Biden was a news story, his poll numbers would drop and Trump would go up. Trump was flying under the radar and people were talking about Harris and is she doing interviews, or she's not that good, she's not that strong. And then Madison Square Garden came around. Now, look, I don't personally think that a lot of opinions were changed by a comedian's joke, but it certainly did shift the narrative around Trump, and people started paying attention to what Trump was saying. And so, like, in the last week and a half, you've got, he wouldn't mind if somebody shoots the media, Liz Cheney having guns trained on her. Now, what he meant was something that I agree with, which is don't be a coward in your office in Washington, send men to war when, you know, you'd think differently if you had 9 guns trained on you. But this is what Trump does. Like, Trump will say things that he knows will get him in trouble. And he says it with enough vagueness that it gives everybody an out. And so when people go, this is obviously like a dude talking about his opponents getting shot, his people have enough wiggle room to look back and go, no. And so it's
right.
Sort
That's
of
what they say to that's what they say to the press and to the defense of it, that internally those people are going, yeah, that's what he was.
I wouldn't mind if she got killed.
Yeah.
you and I both have been in the libertarian world a long time. You've been at the meetings with how they talk about the Cheneys. He said he shouldn't have left the White House despite losing. He called Kamala a prostitute yesterday.
Technically he didn't.
Oh,
one of the people there did. He said that. He said he shouldn't be. She didn't work at McDonald's, and somebody yelled out she worked on the corner, and he started laughing and said, "I love this place."
That's right. Okay, you're right. I remember that now. You've got obviously the RFK stuff. Yeah. Like it just, I think what it's done is I've seen in my own conversations with people like an exhaustion of. I posted the status of one of the reasons I'd like to see Trump lose is because I'm just tired of talking about him. Mm-hmm. And I'm tired of the overreaction on this side and the gaslighting on this side. And so somebody commented, "Oh, you just want him to shut up because of liberal temper tantrums." They're not tantruming. Yes, they're tantruming, but they are tantruming because he is an a-hole. like if it's,
do you want your kids to be like Trump? And if you literally say, "No, I would not want my kids to be anything like that," I'd put them in timeout. I would send them to a military school. I'd do something to knock that out of them. Why are you voting for that person?
Yeah. So I think of the people now, obviously 3/4 of the voters in Georgia cast an early ballot, which is a crazy number. Like over 3 million people voted early in Georgia. And I wonder how many people vote. It's 40% of people vote early. How many people like change their mind? I got in trouble with a bunch of right-wing people on my Twitter. I said, I was watching some Sunday TV morning news show, and one of the pundits was saying she had heard that a group of Hispanics in Pennsylvania had voted for Trump, but were so ticked off about this joke and the finding out about the mass deportations that they were now knocking on doors for Harris. I have no idea if that lady's telling the truth, but I'm sure like maybe there's 4 people out there that's the truth for. But I've always wondered like if people vote one way and like how many people regret their vote, which is why I don't vote early. Like I'm not voting for president.
Yeah, I had heard one story. I had heard one story where somebody came into the polling place and was asking to get their ballot back so they could change their vote after the Puerto Rico joke.
I don't know. I still don't.
I told her she couldn't do it, but
there's 200.
I know you don't think there's a lot into it, but there's 500,000 Puerto Rican descent and people in Pennsylvania. Why take that chance? And that's the thing about the Trump, the way he's been running his campaign is that it works for a while, but it works in certain ways, but it also is it falls in upon itself if you're not careful. And what I'm seeing, irrespective of the campaigns that you see, the people in the rallies and the news media and everything, the get out the vote effort by the Democrats have been huge. And the get out the vote effort by the Republicans have been very weak, very disorganized. In several states, they've relied upon Musk's new PAC, America PAC, who are going out and just doing, they don't know what they're doing, and they're making a lot of mistakes, and they're not getting they're getting fraudulent data on who's getting their doors knocked on. They're not getting good work done because they're lying to people who they're hiring. There's just a lot of things there going on that I think is going to be more telling about how this is going to go.
Yeah, this happened in 2020. I remember doing this episode in 2020, and it's like, here's all the reasons that Trump ran a bad campaign, and it doesn't matter, right? Everybody's going to think it's stolen, which we'll talk about in a minute. But the get out the vote effort is incredibly important in a race like this because everybody knows Trump, and because they know Trump, they either Trump or they hate Trump, or they are in the middle and will like. He's just a known quantity. It's not like 2016 where it's what have we got to lose? We know the old order isn't working.
Yeah,
he could be a centrist. Let's take a chance. And
he'll be tempered. Case. Yeah, he'll be tempered by the people around him, which was true for
3.5 years. Yeah. So he is. So I listened to The Daily by the New York Times last week, and they did a documentary style in Maricopa County. And the Maricopa County Republican chair there was giving this lady a tour of their operations, of their war room. And what was interesting is they are not focusing on getting out the vote. They're doing some getting out the vote efforts. But the thing that they are mostly focused on is election security. And the reporter made the point of, like, they're a little bifurcated in their mission, whereas like the Harris people are allegedly, on Friday, the Harris campaign knocked on 800,000 doors in Pennsylvania. There's 5 million homes in Pennsylvania. I find it really hard to believe that the Harris campaign knocked on 1/5 of all the doors in all of Pennsylvania. There's some inflation going on there, but there are lines. Like, I've seen the pictures of people in line just to get in to be a canvasser. They hired 90,000 people this weekend to be canvassers extra. But you've got $1 billion in your war chest. Your get out the vote effort's really robust. And what that does for you is that means that you have people checking on your voters on election day. Hey, did you vote? Okay, you voted early. Cool. Oh, you didn't vote early. Can I drive you to the poll? Oh, you're going to vote on election day.
Yeah, they get the data on who voted early, so they can know to go to the people who haven't voted yet. They get a list. They know who those people are.
So they see that you haven't voted, and so somebody from the campaign calls you, and that's really important when this race is going to be decided by maybe 20,000 people in 3 different states. And so if you have 90,000 people that showed up to volunteer to make those phone calls and drive people to the polls, that is going to be really hard for the Trump campaign to outmatch that but they're counting on, and this is a must listen. I think you go and listen to it. They're going to be able to sue enough of these ballots off to win the state. So if they lose Michigan by 20,000 votes, what they've done, well, let me take Maricopa. Let me continue on at that. So in Maricopa County, this guy was like showing her their server room, and they've set up like cameras on every ballot box, which I'm not necessarily against. I think that's like a good thing. But like, if you've invested this much time and money into cameras and ballot integrity and lawyers, like, you're going to use it. And so what you're going to get out of that camera system is somebody going to the bathroom that then gets pulled out of context and sent like wildfire around the internet tomorrow saying, see, this person was stealing boxes of ballots when they were moving a file folder box across the room.
Or a USB stick, which is what happened with the workers in Georgia last
or the fire alarm goes off and the sprinkler system is activated. So
Georgia's already had like 3 challenges already in the last week trying to get people knocked off the ballot.
Yeah, Trump's lost 19 lawsuits already. In this election cycle.
They did have the Supreme Court recently said that there are certain ballots now that they're going to have to, like late coming ballots, they're going to have to still count, but they have to separate them in case the lawsuit does go through. That was from the Supreme Court saying they have to separate them out so that if there is some lawsuit, they know they're not into the system, so they can't get pulled out if they need to.
Yeah, look, there's no way around it. This doesn't end tomorrow. Even if Kamala Harris wins, and she wins Arizona, Nevada, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Virginia, which is not going to happen, but it's a blowout. And Ann Selzer is right. Like, we're still going to get lawsuits. You're still going to get half the country not believing that this is real. Like, you can't put that toothpaste back in the tooth. Like, when we were talking about this stuff at the end of 2020, like, I remember us being shocked that 20% of Republicans thought that the election was stolen. What's that number now? 80% of Republicans?
Yep.
90?
It's pretty large, yeah.
So,
and it was all the Republicans were also against. They were wanting to make sure all the people who committed violence on January 6th were put in jail too. Then now they're switched over and they want them all free. They want them all pardoned. They want them out. Free the patriots. Right. It's just amazing to see what's happened over a 4-year period of time because of enough gaslighting.
Yeah. So this doesn't.
But when I was talking about with get out the vote thing too, is that you see these huge numbers on early voting. A lot of that is that effort to get out the vote effort. So when I'm looking at those early vote numbers and I'm seeing certain demographics and things happening, it's just, I don't know. I'm hearing tale over the past week in the polling that because you're seeing some of the latest polls come out, like New York Times and things like that, are starting to show a swing back towards Harris, because they say that from their polling, they're seeing that the undecideds are starting to break towards her instead of Trump.
So let me tell my story. So 2009, I'm executive director of the Libertarian Party of Indiana. And a Republican city councilor, Ed Coleman, comes to the LP and says he wants to switch parties. Awesome. He represents 1 million people. He's an at-large in the 12th largest city in America. He instantly became the largest office holder, representing the most people in the party. And when he ran for re-election in 2011, we moved him down to a district. We all decided, like, this would be the best. Reserve resources. We can't campaign in the whole county. Let's just do a district. So Ed's home district. Ed had been a ward chairman for a long time of the county GOP. So you've got a precinct, which is like a local area of people. Then above a bunch of precincts is a ward chairman and then a county chairman over them. And Ed runs for office and he gets his butt kicked. He gets like 20% of the vote in a two-way race, which is well below what he should have done. What a libertarian candidate in that would probably get 30, especially with all the money. We were running TV ads, mailers, all kinds of stuff. And what we found out in doing our post-election dig was that we didn't factor in the fact that Ed had been an asshole in that district for 12 years. Ed was a jerk. I don't know if Ed's still a jerk, but Ed was a jerk then and had rubbed a lot of people the wrong way.
So do you think he tried coming to the Libertarian Party because he felt like he was getting pushed out?
Yeah, he wasn't getting his way in the Republican Party. And so he came to the Libertarian Party to be a big fish in a small pond. And we could never get anything done because he had rubbed all the city councilors on the Republican side the wrong way. He lost all of his assignments. And he was difficult to handle as a campaign manager. It was a lot of work managing Ed.
Yeah.
But what we didn't factor in was just how many people he defended in that district. And so you sit there and you go, look, we have, as a party for the first time, canvassed most of the houses in this district. We have mailers. We have TV commercials for the first time as a party. And so to get 20% was just like, what the heck, man? Yeah. And it wasn't just straight ticket voting. It was personal against Ed. And I wonder if him being in the news cycle over the last week and a half just makes people go, you know what? He's just an a-hole. I don't want to go through 4 more years of debating what he said when he clearly said what he said, and I don't care. I'm just exhausted by it. Mm-hmm. And I can't take the risk. There are 4 decisive issues in this campaign. It is abortion, immigration, January 6th, and the economy. And the coalition of voters in the Trump campaign is based on immigration and the economy. And
which is ironic.
Yeah, but people look at it like my brother and other people. They go, I was doing better back then. I'm not doing well now. And it doesn't matter that you explain that like the inflation was caused by Trump shutting down the economy and sending everybody stimulus checks. They don't quite compute that because the inflation really hit under Biden. But I just think there's a lot of people going, I can't take the risk with this guy. I can't take the risk. It's not worth my peace. I know I can get by with Kamala. This is just the way that things are. It's been this way. We'll wait her out for 4 years. It's the same calculation people made with Biden. Yeah, he's not my favorite, and he's probably going to die in office, but it's at least I don't have to think about him every day. I don't have to think about her every day.
And it was nice that year or two where it wasn't like daily on the news what was said last night. Who's Trump pissing off now, that sort of thing.
You're telling me you're going to do tariffs and you're going to do mass deportations and you're going to prosecute your enemies and you've got an enemies list and people are getting shot. After January 6th, I just can't take the risk. I'm not surprised that things are breaking Harris's way. Now, Harris has to really drive up Democrat numbers. She's got to turn out Democratic voters, and she can't afford to lose any of them. Yeah. What are some of the polls that you've seen? And I know the exit polls and everything out of Georgia and some of these other places. To me, when I see these numbers, they don't look that much different than 2020. I don't see any kind of major shift in the Georgia stuff. Like I can play a video from John King at CNN where he's showing stuff, and the numbers are pretty identical in terms of 2020. It's not like there's this one big shift that way or this way. There was a record number of black early voters in 2020. And I don't know if that's just shifting the same number of black people will tend to vote Democrat. It's just they're time shifting their vote. I don't know.
It's part of that. And it's there was a lot more white vote early this time too. So it's making those, because everybody's like, well, I'm expecting to see over 30%, and we're seeing 27, 28%. And I think that was because there was a lot of early voting that would normally, like in 2020, they held back because they were told not to vote early. They were told not to vote mail in on the Republican side of things. So you get these people out there that swings the numbers a little bit. But when the numbers finally, I think they're starting to catch up and be more realistic. But we're seeing there's some indication that some male African-American vote is starting to go towards Trump, but there's a stronger female black vote coming out to make up for it. So
no Democratic president has ever won without without black women. No Democrat ever wins. So Ron Brown, go ahead.
When you look at some of those polls, there's one, the right keeps throwing up Atlas. And we were looking at some of the numbers and the methodologies for the Atlas polls and why they're consistently 2 or 3 points more Republican in their polling. And
this is the firm that keeps getting called the most accurate. They're
estimating that they call themselves that. Yes, they're based out of Brazil, first of all. And what we're seeing is that in their methodology, they're showing that the African-American vote is going to go like 60-40 for Trump or for Harris instead of 80-20 or something like that. They're shifting that based off of their demographics and their makeup of what they see as the voting bloc. They're making those changes. And I think that's causing those numbers to shift.
Again, to go back to what we talked about earlier, they are predicting this is what the black vote will do. So this is how we're weighting our poll. We're oversampling because black households, for instance, don't typically participate in ratings. Black households count double. Hispanic households count double in TV and radio ratings. So that's why when you look at the ratings, like black stations and Hispanic stations usually are at the top because they're weighted extra. And that's what a lot of pollsters are doing. They're weighting on what they think, how they think the electorate will look. Which is, so what is this herding thing that people are talking about when it comes to polls?
So the herding thing is where you have people who do polls, and they do a number of polls over a period of time. Now, like with Iowa, there's not a lot of polling there, so it didn't really happen here. But let's say, like, how many polls have you seen in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan over the past 3 months, right? So you start seeing these polls coming out. And if you're doing polling and you see a number come out and it's 4 points off of what everybody else is reporting, you go, man, there must be something wrong with this poll. Let's shelve that one and do another one. And they do that one, and the methodology changes just a little bit, and it comes more in line with what everybody else is reporting. So then they put that poll out, which reinforces what everybody else is reporting. That's what they call herding, is when you start
is that why
hiding the ones that are outliers.
So is that why that's why it looks like it's super tied? Like it may not be tied, it just looks that way?
That's one of the theories of, because it's Nate Silver was one that brings this up. He's like, statistically for these, when you do polling, there's going to be some variations, and to have it be this consistent all the time, he thinks that it's just a statistical impossibility, that he thinks there's manipulation to keep anybody from being too off, because they don't want to be seen as a bad poll after everything comes through. So they won't be trusted next time.
Gotcha. So they're protecting their future business because it's easier to just make it look like this is a toss-up.
Everybody else said this, and it's what we were seeing. Yeah. So you see Selzer come out with the +4 for Harris. And when you look at her polls, she's did 3 polls for Iowa this year. And the first one was when Biden was in and Trump was up 18 points. Harris comes in, she does another poll, Trump is up by 4. Then she does this poll and she's showing Harris up by 4. That is not necessarily out of complete line. Basically, if you see the trend line going, it's not too bad. And if you look at the early voting, you're seeing Democrat and Republican almost identical in the early voting, with like 21% independent. You could legitimately say if those independents are voting more for Harris than Trump, that number may be true. So it becomes like believable. But it's such an outlier from what people were expecting. Some other firms may have pulled that back and changed it and redone it or something, reran the numbers to see what they missed or see if they made a mistake somewhere, maybe adjusted something and go, okay, now we're seeing Trump by 2 or Trump by 1. That's safer to do because that's what everybody thinks is going to happen. It's going to be a Trump state. So why come out with this? She was confident enough in her numbers and willing to put her reputation on the line to put it out there.
Yeah. So Ron Brownstein is somebody that he writes for The Atlantic, somebody that every election season I like to listen to. I think he's really good at breaking down the complex demographics of an election. And so he wrote an article in The Atlantic called The Improbable Coalition That Is Harris's Best Hope. And so I think he summarized really who these two campaigns are going after. Trump is battling heavily on his ability to combine his historical advantage with working white class voters with improved performance among working class Black and Latino voters, especially men, and polls show him making progress towards that goal. Harris hopes, particularly in the key Rust Belt battlegrounds, Rust Belt meaning southern states like North Carolina, Georgia. Sun Belt is like Arizona, Nevada, and then blue wall states are Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. Harris hopes, particularly in the key Rust Belt battlegrounds, depend on preserving enough of her party's traditional advantage among striving minority voters clustered in the biggest cities while expanding the Democrats' edge among the affluent families who step out of their gleaming SUVs at the Whole Foods and Panera Bread a few stores away. Across all the battlegrounds, Trump is pressuring Harris with a powerful pincer movement. From one side, the former president appears poised once again to record towering margins among largely rural working-class white voters who are frustrated with higher prices and drawn to his vitriolic attacks on immigrants, elites, and liberals. From the other direction, polls show Trump with an opportunity to make those small but potentially pivotal gains among urban voters of color, particularly men. Harris is unlikely to repel that multi-front assault unless she can further improve on Biden's already significant 2020 margins in the suburbs around major cities from Philadelphia to Phoenix. So in other words, the way that this, because he has shifted the map of where Republicans and Democrats used to be, he brings in a lot of rural and working class white people. He's now making inroads into Hispanic and Black circles, especially amongst men. And Harris's best bet in repelling that, she's actually overperforming. Is really, white liberals, places like Hamilton County, Indiana. So Hamilton County, Indiana will be one of the first places to report. Tippecanoe County is also a good county to watch here in Indiana. That'll give you a bellwether of where things are going. But Hamilton County, I'm not going to get these numbers exactly right, but 2012 with Mitt Romney voted 33 points. There's a 33-point gap between Romney and Obama in 2012. Very Republican area. A lot of Republican power came out of Carmel, Fishers, Noblesville, Hamilton County. Trump in 2016 was like 14 points. So 33 to 14. 2020, it was 4 points. And I have heard rumors that the Republicans have given up on winning Hamilton County. Okay, so this is, look, I'm trafficking rumor and gossip at this point, but if Hamilton County goes Democrat, that's a sign that Harris is driving that number up in these suburban areas, driven by women. And
there's
so
another area too.
Where
is that? And you talk about the rural areas, and the rural areas going for Trump. There are a lot of farmers who got really screwed on the last time he put in tariffs.
Yeah.
And they remember that, and they hear tariff now. I think it's going to start scaring them. I think that's part of the reason why you're seeing numbers in Iowa that you weren't expecting, is I think not just the abortion issue, because that was such a hot topic issue since they just put their abortion ban in place and it's like really major up focus, but there's also some people there rumbling about the tariffs issue in the farming communities.
Yeah. So let me play this video. We'll just do a little reaction to this video, but it's Harry Enton on CNN. And then I don't know how much of the Ron Brownstein part we'll get to. This is a 10-minute video. I don't think we need to play all of it, obviously, but Harry Enton kind of breaks down. He's their numbers guy, and he talks like a 30s Italian gangster. But he's breaking down the margin and why this looks 50-50. And he explains, and I need you to explain it to me because I don't understand math and points and all this stuff. But he explains that it could be a blowout Trump's way or a blowout Harris's way. And because everything is in the margin of error at this point, because all these different polls that are herded together show everything just toss up, that could be hiding the fact that this is actually a huge Harris or a huge Trump victory. So let's hear him explain that, and then you can maybe explain it in like English terms.
At the polling aggregates across those 7 key battlegrounds that we've been talking about, right?
Can you hear it?
In the Sun Belt, you see a little bit more red than blue. In fact, there is no blue in the Sun Belt. But again, it's way too close to call. Trump by 3 in Arizona, 2 in Georgia, 1 in North Carolina, a tie in Nevada. Come over to those Great Lakes and a little bit more blue here. But look at this, just a point in Michigan, less than a point. When you're breaking out this symbol, Jessica, the less than, how close the race is. And then, of course, in Pennsylvania, all important Pennsylvania, tie, T-I-E-D. That's the bottom line of this election. Way too close to call at this point. All of the key states within a couple of points, and arguably the most important one, Pennsylvania, T-I-E-D.
Just tied. Put that in terms of the electoral map for us. How does that bear out?
Yeah, how does the electoral map bear out? If the results match the polling averages, guess what? Neither candidate gets to 270 electoral votes. I don't even know what other way to put it, because Pennsylvania becomes the all-important key state. Whoever wins Pennsylvania wins the election. We've been talking about it week after week. The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, just to the southwest of me here in New York City, becomes the all-important state. If you can figure out who wins Pennsylvania, you probably know who's going to win the election, because at this point, the polls can only tell you that both candidates are short of the 270 electoral votes needed to win. That is, of course, if the polls are actually right on the money, which they probably won't be.
Okay, explain that to us, because they're not perfect.
No, they are not perfect. Let's go through history, right? Let's go back since 1972 and look at the key battleground states and say, how off were the polling averages? The polls aren't perfect. They are a tool. They get you in the neighborhood. But when the race is this close, when all the key battleground states are within 3 percentage points, that's within the average error band. The average error band for state polling average since 1972 is, get this, 3.4 points. 3.4 points. And then if you talk about a margin of error, like a 95% confidence interval, we're talking about more like plus or minus 9 points. All of the key battleground states are within this error band, and they're actually within the average error band as well. So let's talk about what happens if you have an average error and apply it to the electoral map, right? If we have an average error and Donald Trump benefits from the average error, guess what? He gets way past 270 electoral votes. He gets to 312. Why? He carries all the Great Lake battleground states. He carries the Southeast battleground states in North Carolina and Georgia, and he carries Nevada and Arizona out west. But of course, Jessica, there's no guarantee that the polls being offered necessarily benefit Donald Trump, even though they did both in 2016 and 2020, because they could, in fact, the polling miss could benefit Kamala Harris like it did the Democrats back in 2022. If there was, in fact, a polling miss that benefited Kamala Harris, an average polling miss, she'd get north of 300 electoral votes. Look at that. She'd get to 319. Why? She'd carry the Great Lake battleground states, right? She'd carry Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. She'd carry the Southeast battleground states, Georgia, and North Carolina. And she'd carry the Southwest battleground states of Nevada and Arizona. So the bottom line is this. The polls at this point to a race that's way too close to call, but an average miss in either direction could turn this into an electoral college blowout. We just don't know at this point.
Okay, so nobody knows anything.
No, that's the problem with polling. Is everybody says polling says this, but when you're talking those percentages, all these polls are plus or minus 3%. So that's a 6-point swing. Yeah. But in their methodology, they state this is accurate to up to 3 or plus or minus 3%. So that's a 6-point swing in any of the numbers that they're giving you. One way, it could go 3 one way, it could go 3 the other way. And when the states are 1%, or coming in 1%, 0.5%, 2%, that could easily be the other way around. They could be off that much. And in those demographics that are putting together, the methodologies are putting together, what they think that the electorate looks like, if they're off, they miss something, they don't catch the late turn towards one of the candidates that they may see if they were doing the polling a little bit later. When you have those things happening, this could change either way. And I know that we talked about it before when we did the last show, was that this consensus is if they're off, it's going to be a blowout one way or the other. It's not going to be like a mix where it's going to be off for Harris in this state, but Trump in this state.
And don't we really need it to be? Like we really, even if Harris gets 319 and she wins all those battleground states, which I don't think is going to happen, that's at least people in the margin to go, okay, at least it's a blowout.
They're talking about if she wins Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. Yeah. But she does not take North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada. Right? Those go Trump. Let's say she wins with 270, right at 270. What do you think is going to happen from now until they count the Electoral College votes? Not only are you going to have all the, of course, descending on those states and trying to get something switched over legally, but you're going to have a pressure on all of the states to get faithless electors to turn.
Yeah, that's already happening. The playbook from 2020 is the playbook for 2024. Like, pressure these state legislators to slate
not just that,
Trump
but just going after the individual proper electors. Remember in 2016 when Trump won, there was a lot of people looking at, will anybody change their vote? Anybody in the electoral college actually change their vote and make it switch over to a Harris to a Clinton win?
There are already legislators in Georgia, Republicans, saying that they're getting phone calls and pressure to vote certain ways.
Yeah.
I mean, when you vote for president, you are not casting your direct vote to elect that president. I have been an elector. So the Libertarian Party at the convention in 2012 or 20, I think it was 2012, I was an elector. The convention had 13 spots or whatever, how many congressional seats we have. And there were 20 people running. And because I was executive director and trusted by the group, I was an elector. Funny enough, I don't even know if you know this, I was an elector for the No Labels campaign this year. So they reached out to me and asked if I would be an elector, and I said, sure. And then 2 days later, they announced they weren't going to have a candidate. So
you shuttered everything down. Yeah.
I know. But you as an elector would go to Washington, D.C. and cast your vote. And so the Congress, I believe the House, seats the electors. And then the Senate certifies the vote. Right. Is that how that works?
So what happens is the party that wins the election, it's their electors that get sent. Right. So they choose people who they are going to believe are going to be as faithful as possible to the party wants them to vote. Right. But we saw in 72, I believe it was, that one of the electors didn't want to vote for Nixon, and he chose instead the Libertarian candidate, John Hosper.
He's from Virginia.
Right. He's the only Libertarian to get an electoral vote.
I think some states,
and his running mate.
In Indiana, you're bound to vote for
now. They started putting in after 2016. They started putting in rules and laws that you can't be a faithless elector anymore. You have to vote for it, but not all states are like that.
Gotcha. Yeah, you can switch your vote. So we'll do a show on this because we're going to talk about it. It's just we'll wait till the elections and we'll get a little more.
Because if it does come out 303, 319. For either of the candidates, it's that not much of a win, then the faithless elector doesn't matter nearly as much. Then we're talking lawsuits and things like that. But if you're talking 270, 268, that's just one person has to switch their vote and throw it in the House, and then Trump wins because the Republicans own that. Right?
Me and the speaker, we got a little surprise.
And you can say, and a lot of people don't understand this, is, it's going to go thrown to the House, but it's going to be the new House seated. If the Democrats win the House this year, then they'd be able to vote for Harris to go in if it's not that way. But that's not how it works. Each state gets a vote. So Utah has the same number of votes as California. There are more states that are red with small numbers than there are blue states.
So it almost operates like the Senate. It doesn't matter. California's not going to get 55 and Indiana's going to get 13. Each of the 50 states has one vote in the House.
Yep. They have to poll the state like they did back in 1776 when they were polling the delegations. Remember the movie, our favorite movie, 76? They poll the delegation, and whatever the delegation votes for, that's the one vote they get, yay or nay.
Okay. So what if it's like Georgia where it's 50-50?
Is it going to be 50-50? What's going to happen? That's the question, is that what's the House number going to look like? But even if I think there's enough states that are going to be blue states to get one vote as opposed to red states as opposed to the blue states that Georgia won't matter. It'll be enough of I think there's like a 5 or 6 point state difference in that regard. So it's going to be really hard for us. 269 is not going to end up with a Democrat winning.
I think it's just a good time to remind people like, oh, I can't wait for tomorrow to be over.
Oh yeah, I know. I was wishing it was like today, just be done. Oh.
No, tomorrow we will know more information.
Yeah,
Wednesday we will know more, but it is not over tomorrow.
But I remember. I don't know if we were talking in 2020, and I was watching one county in Florida, and that's when I said I think Biden's got it because of the way that county was going. There's little indicators, where you can get a feel for how the rest of the vote's going to go across the country. Because if this county or this district, there's one in Virginia right now. I think a lot of people are looking at Virginia 7th. If that's going to be like the bellwether, how's this election going to go? And you can get a good feeling for it, but it's not by any stretch of the imagination going to tell you for sure. It's just going to give you a feel for how it's going. And if for some reason they call Georgia early for Harris, I think it's a blowout. But if it's not, then we're in for a long night looking. So
I've got a 24-hour pass to the Cook Political Report. I can give you a login if you want, but they have counties to look at. Fayette County, Georgia, Carrabba's County, North Carolina, Nash County, North Carolina, Muskegon, Michigan, Bucks County, Pennsylvania, Cumberland County, Pennsylvania, South County, Wisconsin, Maricopa County, Arizona, and Ozaukee County, Wisconsin. And so they also have like a hour by hour breakdown. So 6 p.m., Indiana closes first. Watch Tippecanoe and Hamilton counties. Watch the Indiana governor's race. 7 p.m., Georgia, Virginia 7th District. 7:30, start watching North Carolina. Because remember, North Carolina in 2016, when it went for Trump, that was like, Linz and I just started laughing. So, this is going to Trump. Florida apparently counts votes really quickly. Osceola County is one to watch in Florida. I think that's around Orlando. Yeah, there's one in the north. There's one on the northwest that you can look at too for a good indicator. But I don't think we're going to learn a lot from Florida this year. I think because just the way the Florida is and the way it's run. But there's going to be a lot of other places to get good information from. I saw Trump saying they really need to have all the votes counted by 9 p.m. If they don't have 9 p.m., it's all stolen. Dude, okay, so Wisconsin, Milwaukee County, whatever the county is, has, I think it was like 100,000 ballots to process that they can't process until the polls close. Milwaukee, this is what people need to understand about the blue counties. This is not what it was not rigged. It's just the people are ignorant of how votes are counted. Yeah. In Marion County, you have 1 million people. In Rush County, you have 30,000 people. It takes longer to count ballots in Marion County because of 1 million people versus Rush County. Yeah. And there's more people packed into these precincts than other places. Marion County always reported last when you're watching results for the governor's race. Center Township, where I live, the most blue area of the state, always was the last to report. It wasn't an indication of fraud. It's just that there's way more people that live in Center Township than there are in Henry County, Indiana. When you have a county like the county I grew up, the townships I grew up in, we're talking a couple thousand people. You can almost hand count that, right? The first people who vote on election day, right? They already know who's going to win that little district because there's like 25 people there, right? Somewhere in New Hampshire, isn't it? And it was funny because Catcherd's on Twitter the other day saying,
these people already have all these votes in. If they can't get this count done that night, what's wrong with them? It's like the Republicans have made it illegal for them to pre-count any votes that come in. Because they don't want anybody knowing what the numbers are, because they would keep it secret. They think that it's going to leak and they're going to find out how many they need to win and blah, blah, all that conspiracy stuff. So they're not allowed to touch the mail-in or early ballots. Even though all these people voted early for this period of time, they can't count them yet in a lot of these states.
It all stems from Nixon, because in 60, there are very real thoughts. Now, there's been audits since then to show that Kennedy legitimately won Cook County, Illinois. Yeah. But at the time, that was not the case. Nixon thought that, and the country thought that that had been stolen from him. Mm-hmm. And he was he graciously conceded, was the first person to shake Kennedy's hand after his speech on Inauguration Day. Mm-hmm. But that made him exceedingly paranoid, and the party very paranoid about illegal voting. Right. And so from the late 60s on, you've had this 40, 50-year history of Republicans trying to things like voter ID and printers.
I grew up with the whole Democrat Chicago voting, the dead people are voting and all that stuff. It's an old joke that I always thought was true until you go back and look at the history. And it's like they did an audit on Georgia from 2020 to see how many illegals voted. They found that there were like 12 people who registered who weren't legally authorized to vote, and 8 of them voted, or 7 or 8 of them voted.
One Chinese national just tried to vote, and they caught him and are deporting him.
Yeah, but but his vote's going to count because it was already in the system. They can't pull it out, so they don't know how he voted. But yeah, that's one person. It's these people.
Why would you risk? Why? So to finish my point.
Yeah,
Republicans are the ones who have secured the ballot box, and they should be commended for that. So it's funny that they're the ones casting doubt on this stuff. And then if you're an illegal, why would you show up with your ID to vote? Why would Kamala Harris be the person that you're going to risk your freedom for? Mm-hmm. It doesn't, like, they're just things that we have to stop and look at this stuff and go, let's just really think.
That's what they talk about, illegal alien crime, right? It's like, do you think these people are sticking their necks out? Because the minute they get caught, they're going to go. So why would they do that? They're going to keep their head down. They're going to be quiet. They're going to do what they can do and not. It's like it used to be the joke if you're driving drunk or something like that, you just be more careful because you don't get pulled over, right? So that thing where these people are not sticking their necks out for a couple of bucks here or to try and steal something there. It's just not going to happen unless they're truly desperate.
So let's give kind of an opposite opinion from a surprising source. His name is Henry Olsen, excuse me. And Henry Olsen is a famous never Trumper. So I was surprised to see him write an article in the New York Post about how Trump's going to win. He's a ballot counting guy. His podcast is, let me see what his podcast is called, Beyond the Polls Podcast. So he's a conservative guy who's just a never Trumper, and he's borderline TDS-y about it. Like almost as bad as Rhinehold.
Nobody can be that bad.
Yeah.
That guy, man, you can't listen to
him. So actually, oh, look, there's a video. I haven't watched the video. I was going to read the article. My voice is just so tired that it sounds bad, but let me play the video for you. Oops, hold on. I was trying to bring it over so Rhinehold can listen.
Yet a trifecta, President, Senate, and House, that will let them govern the country effectively for the next 2 years. Nobody has a crystal. I have a prediction. Donald Trump wins the Electoral College 297 to 241, even though he loses the popular vote narrowly to Vice President Harris. He does it by flipping Georgia, flipping Pennsylvania, flipping Wisconsin, Nevada, and Arizona. Narrowly losing Michigan, but it's possible that he could still win that. What about the Senate? History tells us that the Senate doesn't always go to the people leading in the polls. In the last few elections, the Real Clear Politics average of Senate polls has shown that 3 people on average who trail going into Election Day end up winning. And it's not accidental who those people are. 10 of the 11 races that had come from behind wins go to the candidate from the party whose presidential nominee either won the state in a presidential year or carried the state in the previous year. In other words, party trumps person in today's senatorial election. That means if I think Donald Trump is going to flip those states, I think Donald Trump is going to carry the Republican candidate to victory in most of them. The exception is Arizona, where Kari Lake has her own negative vibes going on from her election denial and her constant litigation and arguments against McCain moderate Republicans from her failed gubernatorial campaign 2 years ago. She remains in every public poll well behind Donald Trump. And even if Trump wins, he would have to win probably by 5 points or more to carry Lake over the line. In every other state, if Trump wins by a point or so, he'll carry the Republican. That means Dave McCormick wins in the Senate. That means Sherrod Brown, in a state that Trump will probably win by 7 to 11 points, loses in Ohio to Bernie Moreno. That means that Eric Hovde beats Tammy Baldwin in Wisconsin. And that means that Sam Brown, the man who everyone wrote off about a month ago, becomes the next senator from Nevada. What about the House? The House is going to go in line with the presidential popular vote with a twist, which is that if Harris wins by only 1 point, it's really a jump ball, but I think Republicans will keep control, that they'll add a couple of seats, maybe as 5 to 7 to the 221 that they have coming in. Of course, House races don't get a whole lot of polling, so we could see a lot of stuff going on there that we can't figure out. But if Harris only wins by 1, that's 3 points less than Joe Biden won by. And there's more than enough districts that Trump will carry that I would expect that would counterbalance many of the losses that Republicans will get in seats that they hold, that Biden and Harris both carried and will carry. How will this translate? How could this be wrong? What I'm doing is mainly taking a look at where the national partisan advantage is that for the last century, Democrats have gone into virtually every election with an edge in partisan identification. Sometimes it's small, like 1 point in 2020. Usually it's larger. There's a lot of evidence that in the last 4 years that flipped. If we have an even partisan split, which would be the second most Republican electorate since 1932, that's the margin that I'm looking at. But if there's even 1 point difference, if there's more Republicans in the electorate than there are Democrats, then it could be even better for Trump. It could mean a 56th Senate seat and another state in Michigan. Of course, if it's worse, if there's a very high turnout of Democratic groups that don't usually participate even in presidential years, Harris could do better. And if Harris does better, the margins are fine enough that Trump could lose. But I think the balance of the evidence says this is a good field for Republicans. America has seen the Democratic Party in the last 4 years, and it's willing to give Donald Trump's Republicans a chance. And that's what my prediction is. Trump 297, Harris 241, Republican strong majority in the Senate, and they get the trifecta that they crave.
Hendrix Gin unveils Hendrix Grand.
Yeah, so he's basically saying, I would say this is a function of COVID, that people like Danica Patrick, the race car driver, somebody that's never been political. I've interviewed Danica Patrick. I've been around her. Don't think much of her. Not very nice person, at least back then, 20 years ago. She's voted for the first time in her life, but she's somehow speaking at the Hamilton County Lincoln Day dinner. Like, why you would have somebody speak that just got into politics 6 months ago, it's beyond me. But there's somebody that has been activated to be a Republican in the last few years. And I think you can tie a lot of that directly to COVID. I just think the effect of people being woken up during COVID grew the Republican Party, is what I just heard Henry Olsen say. So what did you think of his analysis? He's saying the Republicans is bigger, and so therefore the Republicans are going to win. 50 seats, and will you be able to handle it?
It is what it is if it happens, and I can see that as a possibility. I don't see that with what I'm seeing. But when you look at the difference, you say, oh, now more people are coming out and registering as Republican or identifying as Republican. They're missing that there's a lot more people who are claiming to be independent than there ever was before. So who are those independents and who are they going to vote for? So you got a lot of activated Republicans, but you also got a lot of disaffected Republicans and disaffected Democrats who are tired of all this negative politics. And who are they going to pull their ballot for when they go in the ballot box and they have the two choices? if they're really checking out because of that, and they've got activated to go out and to get out the vote, or for seeing the way the campaign's been running. I think they're going to go more on the vibes side as opposed to just the constant negativity that they're hearing. But that, like I said, it could go either way. It's that close on, it's been years that we've been so close 50-50. I guess it's really rare in this country that it's been like that. There was a period of time after Jefferson got in, there was that period of time where they were mostly in charge for the 3 or 4 presidential elections and stuff like that. But being this close has really been a rare thing. So there's going to be a lot of things that come out of this. Either if Trump wins, then there's going to be a huge reckoning on a couple different fronts, especially on the Democrat side, maybe some bifurcation of the parties. We might see something like that. If it goes the other way, I think without Trump running for a 4th time, I don't know if he gets a 4th chance. His age and just the fact that he'll have lost twice now.
No, he's going to run.
But that's the thing, is that
you will see
what's going to happen. Yeah, but what's going to happen to the party, right? Is the Republican Party going to split? We've seen splits in the past in history from things like this happening with a populist leader, Andrew Jackson, that sort of thing. You see these things happening if you look back at the timeline of the parties and how they evolved over time. There could very well be a bifurcation there. So I don't know what's going to happen at the fallout of this. As far as Trump winning this, he could very well win it. I'm surprised that he was even nominated, that the Republicans put him back up again, but it is what it is. People are gravitating to him. They want that. And I'm like, okay, if that's what you want, if Trump wins, you're going to see what a lot of people have been talking about, I think.
They're going to love it. That's what they want. They want,
right. I think a lot of people are going to go, oh, I didn't think, I thought, like we had said before, I thought he was just joking about some of this stuff or being hyperbolic about some of this stuff. When they see it play out, I think it's going to have a different effect.
Like when I talked to a family member about Trump and I said, okay, here's how he achieved the economic success of the first term. Those people won't be there. And he's also going to do this over here. He's going to do that and this and that. And then when they hear it, they go, oh, because they're not paying attention. They're not listening to you and I follow this stuff really closely. We listen to him. We watch him. I think that the mistake that people make is, oh, you're just buying into the media narrative. Mm-hmm. No, I watch Trump's rallies and I'm disturbed by what comes out of his mouth. And I don't want him to do the things that come out of his mouth. I'm not bamboozled by the Washington Post or whatever. Like he's the objectionable one. It's not a narrative that's being spun. It's that he's a grotesque person with horrible policies. Let me clean something up. I got Norm Ornstein and Henry Olsen mixed up. Norm Ornstein is the former Republican TDS guy. Henry Olsen is a National Review writer, Commonwealth Foundation, vice president of the Manhattan Institute, works at the Ethics and Public Policy Center. So he's a little more right-leaning than I made him sound like he was. So not a big deal. I think I still wanted to get that perspective, and I thought his point was interesting, but just wanted to make sure that I got confused. No, but to continue on that, I think there are a lot of people who are just, okay, so it got overshadowed by the Puerto Rican joke. But I think one of the most disturbing things that I saw was the 60 Minutes piece with the guy that's going to run his immigration department saying, how are you going to separate an illegal from their families? We would deport the whole family. Yep. Okay, so you're going to deport American citizens from Idaho or Ohio to Colombia, where they don't have citizenship. Yeah,
they're not going to be citizens.
How is that?
There is an executive order that's going to strip them of birthright citizenship because they didn't earn it because their parents were here illegally. That's the thinking that's been in the Republican Party for years, that you don't get birthright citizenship if your parents were here illegally. That's why you have all these dreamers that are out there. That's the whole dreamers block, right? They were given protection status even though they technically weren't citizens because of this argument or this disagreement. He's just going to write an executive order and do it. And he'll have his whole cabinet and all the line workers being loyal to him, and he'll just execute because there's no one who's going to be able to stop him once he starts.
Don't think I agree with you, but I do see your direction. I don't think it's going to be as loyal as you think, but We'll see. I tend to think like back to 2016 and 2020, and like people. The beautiful thing about doing this for so long, heading into the 13th year of this, maybe 14th year, is that this will be my third election cycle doing. No, this will be my fourth presidential cycle. We are libertarians. You gain the perspective of, okay, I remember thinking these things, and I can go back and listen to the shows. And I know I was saying the same things about Trump back then. Like, I just read Mike Duncan's book on the fall of the Roman Republic and the breaking of norms in 2016. And I was like, this guy is the Grackeye brothers. And I was really anti-Trump in 2016. It really bothered Greg because I was like, if this guy gets elected, it's going to be really bad. We will not be able to go back. And that's been totally right. There's no doubt that if he gets elected again, it's going to change things in good and bad ways, but mostly bad. And you'll never, like, people, my buddy Abdul today said, I can't wait to just get back to normal politics.
Yep. And
I said, you have to just get over that. You have to disabuse yourself of that notion. Like, we are never going back to 1984's election. Like, we're never going back to the West Wing. That politics is never coming back. It didn't really exist. Mm-hmm. Like, we're heading into a much different type of politics and a different type of government and a different type of society. It's going to look different. It's going to be good. It's going to be worse. It's going to be better. It's going to be just different. But I think people really need to prepare themselves mentally that every presidential election is now going to be like this. It's going to be real tight, and it's going to be contested, and it's going to be a lot of lawyers. And when you hire lawyers, Rhinehold, they're going to want to be used. Like, people, the Republicans and Democrats didn't spend 4 years building systems, camera systems, lawyer teams for no reason. They're going to find something because they've paid these people.
They're going to invent. They're going to find something, but they're going to find anything. But
yeah.
I don't know if I agree with you on a lot of that, because if you go back, there's been populist movements in the United States before that have led to what we thought was going to be this is the new normal, and then it changes. And remember back, it was 2012, 2008 when McCain ran, and there were people telling at a rally saying that Obama's the devil or was going to destroy the country and is a horrible person. And McCain stopped him and said, no, he's not a bad person. I know him. I just disagree with him. You don't do that. And that's the type of policies I think people would rather have. It's just not going to happen when you have this kind of populist leader revving up the populist movement inside of the United States. We just need to, what happens when that populist leader goes away? Because J.D. Vance isn't going to be able to carry it. DeSantis couldn't do it. Trump is unique in that regard, where he's so able to gaslight people and push their buttons enough to motivate them to do things. I don't know if anybody else can. And if he's no longer in the picture, I don't see that continuing too long. It starts to get back to a more normal.
All right.
The populist movement is always going to be there. That's the whole thing, because that's when in the libertarian movement, it's always been there, right? The Pat Buchanans, the David Dukes, those types of things, Lee Rockwell's, those have always been an underlayer of society. They just got motivated from the Tea Party on to have a more power and more voice. I don't know if it sustains continuously from now going forward. I think there is going to be reckonings and changes over the next couple decades. I may not be here to see it, but I think it's going to happen that way.
All right, my dude. What do you think? Do you want to make a prediction? Is your prediction? I think you said Harris was going to win. What have you changed your prediction?
I have the feeling. No, I have a feeling, just like I did before, that the late undecideds are going to break for Harris. I think the polls over the past 2 days are starting to show that. The Times Siena poll is showing Harris up in all three of the Michigan, Wisconsin, and I think Pennsylvania was still even, but they were showing her ahead in North Carolina and I think still ahead in Georgia. Don't know if that's going to hold out. I don't know what's going to happen. Those numbers are too tight based off that polling. I don't know if the polling's right. I think the polling is off. I'm looking at down ballot stuff that doesn't match. I still have the feeling that Harris is going to win, but I will not be surprised at all if Trump wins.
Yeah, I don't think there's any way to predict it. But so I just did a map, one of those map thingies.
Mm-hmm. I did in 2020.
Yeah, I think Donald Trump is going to win. Let me see here. Let me pull this up. All right, let's just reset this and go through it. How about that? Reset map. All right. I don't know why they do this weak thing, like blurring some of them out. Just make them red or not.
Leaners and things like that.
Yeah, I don't care for leaners. Make a decision. All right, giving her New Hampshire, Trump. All right, so we're going to go to the swing states. Mm-hmm. All right, let's start with Nevada. I think it's going Trump. What do you think?
I think it's going Harris.
Okay, I guess I'll do another one then. Hold on. So do your little map. All right, so you think it's going Harris. Mm-hmm. I think it's going Trump. Arizona.
I think it goes Trump, but barely.
Okay, so we both agree that's going to Trump.
I think Trump's going to run into the same issues that Kerry Lake has with election denial stuff. I think it's going to be close, but I still think he's going to pull it out.
I think it's an interesting thing where there's going to be down ballot races. So Iowa, one of the theories in Iowa apparently is that they have very contested congressional races, and abortion is a huge issue. And I forgot to mention this earlier, but in Iowa, there was an abortion law, 6-week law put into place in the summertime that's been very controversial there, which is why you saw since her last poll so many women move. Mm-hmm. But the person I was listening to, I forget who it was, basically, I think it was maybe her, saying, yeah, the congressional races here are going to bleed into the presidential race and can influence the race. So Kerry Lake in Arizona is such a loon and so disliked there. That may affect the race there.
Yep.
Okay, so Wisconsin.
Harris.
Me too. Mm-hmm. I think she's going to win Wisconsin. I think there's a bleed over for what's his face? Michigan.
I still think it's Harris. I think their community breaks on election.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the Dearborn community and the Muslim vote is, I think, one of the real wild cards in this, because Gen Z is hard to poll. The reason she's not getting a lot of minority votes and a lot of black voters, younger black voters, are skeptical is because of Palestine. I think Ta-Nehisi Coates is a good bellwether of where a lot of young voters are, and I think Michigan could go either way, but I think the polling looks like it's pretty solidly hers.
And when I see the breakout polling on the Muslim community, it's like 40 Kamala, 40 Stein. And I know that she's going to get a lot of votes, but I think when they get in the ballot box, it's going to be like when people say they're going to vote Libertarian, they're going to get in there and go, I just can't take a chance.
Yeah. All right.
If it wasn't a close state, I would say, yeah, but it's not a close state. So
yeah.
Georgia, because of all the early voting and the turnout, I still think is going to go slightly Harris.
Okay.
I know a lot of people probably disagree with me on that.
I think it's going back to Trump. So I'm 252 Republicans, 251 Democrats. You're 270 Democrats. So you already have Harris winning. I don't. North Carolina?
The polling I'm seeing and the fact that they're spending so much time there, that Trump has been there trying to defend it and Harris has been there trying to take it. I think the momentum is on that side. And I think she's going to squeak it by.
Okay.
She almost got it. Biden almost got it in 2020. I think she slips it over.
All right. I think it's Trump. Mm-hmm. I think he's raised the floor, and I think some of these southern states, you're going to see a lot of turnout. There's nothing in the early voting that has made me go, oh, it seems fairly on the same pace as in the past. Right. Okay, Pennsylvania is all we got left. Go ahead.
Right.
What you're going to say.
I was going to say in North Carolina, remember Trump won that by like 0.25% or whatever, because that was the one I got wrong in 2020. And it was off by such a small amount. I was really frustrated. So I remember that. So that was really close. It could just swing over. You never know. But for Pennsylvania, I think it was really tied until the Puerto Rico joke. I think that's going to push it over for Harris.
Okay. So
although I'm of a mind, because I know that Musk is spending a lot of money there, but I don't know if he's good at what he's doing. He's new into politics. I don't think he's going to be as effective as they would hope. And I think
like his ad calling her the C word.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That wasn't great.
And I think the Puerto Rican joke with 500,000 descendants of Puerto Ricans in Pennsylvania, I think it might push it.
Now, see, I heard there are 270,000 Puerto Ricans in Pennsylvania.
And I've seen over 450,000, but of Puerto Rican descent.
All right. So you've got Kamala is at 308, Republicans at 230. All right. Do I pick Pennsylvania for Trump, which would make Trump the winner at 287? Or do I pick Harris, which would give her the win at 270? You know,
comes down to the soccer moms in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I think I'm going to buy what you're selling. I think Harris was there all day today.
Yep. And they've been a huge ground game there too.
Yeah. And the late breaking people are going for Harris just because it's too much Trump. All right. So I think I'm giving Harris 270, Trump 268. All right. Let's see. I'll screenshot these.
We'll see if we're both wrong. Yeah.
Man, it's just such a toss up.
We did so well in 2020. I hate to take the chance here on this one.
Well, I know we got to
ruin it.
I know. I remember being the Lions of Liberty, and they were like, "No way."
Yeah, no way. I said Biden gets over 300, and they were like, "That's impossible. That's not going to happen. That would be like a huge deal if that happened." And I'm like,
I know. I did talk to Odermatt today, and he said it's been insane with the amount of door knocking and mailers and shit.
Yeah, so, you remember if one certain person we know is still living in Pennsylvania, maybe it would be different. That extra vote could swing it.
Gosh, who do we know that lived in Pennsylvania?
Used to, at least. He doesn't live there anymore.
Okay. You tell me off air. All right. Sorry for my voice, everybody.
Yeah.
I'm just raspy. My voice is worn out. You know how it gets. I saw an ENT this year, actually. Said, why do I lose my voice for a month in the wintertime? And she said, you're an Afrin addict, so that dries out your nasal canal and burns off your nose hairs. And you eat too late and drink too much water before bed, because I drink like 32 ounces of water before bed. And she's like, so you have too much gastric juices in your belly. So just try not drinking water for the 5 hours before you go to bed. I'm like, I can't do that. But she's like, you have silent acid reflux. So
Pepsi before bed.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's see how it fares out. Leave a comment in the Facebook group, get into the Facebook group, or on my Substack at chrisspangle.com. In the show notes, you'll find a link to the Facebook group, and let us know what you think. What's your prediction? Do your 270towin.com map and post it in the group and see what you think. All right. We will see you in a few days, maybe Wednesday. We'll see how it goes, or we'll talk Thursday. Just once the dust clears and we can take in enough information to have a good show, then we'll be with you. All right. Take care. Thanks, everybody.